The air smelled faintly of rain, even though the sky outside had cleared. I sat on the edge of the sofa, fingers tracing the rim of my coffee mug, watching the steam curl up into nothing. It was one of those rare moments when the world seemed to slow down enough for memories to come rushing in, sharp, stubborn, and impossible to ignore. She was there, just across the room, standing by the doorway. Not moving, not speaking, just looking. The way she looked at me wasn't quite a question, but it wasn't an answer either. It was the kind of look that feels like a secret someone's been carrying around for years, something too heavy to share, but too close to let go. Her eyes, the color of dark honey, caught the fading light and held it like a silent challenge. I wanted to say something, anything, but my throat felt tight, like words were tangled inside. She was always like that. Graceful, poised, with a quiet kind of beauty that didn't shout but still pulled you in. I noticed the slight crease at the corner of her eyes when she smiled, something she tried to hide but failed at every time. That was the part of her I thought about when no one else was around, the cracks beneath the polish. Her hand brushed the doorframe as if steadying herself, fingers lingering just a second too long. I caught that little movement, the one no one else would see, and for a moment, I felt like I understood something she wasn't saying. Maybe she did this every time she was about to say something that scared her, or maybe it was just habit. Either way, it was an invitation wrapped in hesitation. I shifted forward, the old wooden floor creaking softly beneath me. "I wasn't supposed to be here," she finally said, voice low, almost a whisper. There was a weight in those words, like they carried the echoes of a past she hadn't told me about. I watched her lips move, delicate and full, unsure if she was scolding herself or me. But the way her eyes softened just before she spoke made everything else fall away. I could see the years behind that look, the quiet regrets, the walls she'd built, the moments she'd let slip through her fingers. She stepped inside fully then, closing the door softly behind her. The light shifted, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the space between us disappeared. I was aware of the scent of her perfume, something warm, a hint of vanilla and something deeper, earthier. It was familiar, comforting, like a place I didn't know I wanted to go. Her hand found mine, fingers brushing lightly, barely there but enough to send a ripple through me. I didn't pull away. Instead, I let my thumb trace the back of her hand, a slow, careful motion, like trying not to break something fragile. It was the kind of touch that spoke louder than words, the quiet confession of someone who's been waiting for a moment like this. She swallowed, eyes flickering down to our hands, then back up, and that was when she said it again, softer this time. "You're not supposed to be here." But then she did something I didn't expect. Without another word, she closed the small distance between us and kissed me. Not a quick brush of lips, but something slow, deliberate. Her mouth was warm, hesitant at first, then sure, like she was trying to make sense of a feeling she'd buried for too long. When she pulled away, her breath hitched slightly, and her eyes searched mine for something, permission, maybe, or forgiveness. The room was suddenly too quiet, too still. I wanted to say something, to break the silence, but all I could do was watch as she lingered in the doorway longer than she needed to. Her gaze held mine, unspoken and full of questions either of us was ready to ask. And then, almost like a dare, I whispered, "Why now?" She didn't answer. The door stayed open. And I realized, maybe for the first time, that some moments change everything, even if we don't know how yet. The door clicked shut behind her, but the room didn't feel any smaller. If anything, it stretched wider, filled with the quiet weight between us, like a fragile glass ready to crack. She pulled her coat tighter around her shoulders, but it didn't hide the slight tremble in her hands. I watched her for a long moment, wondering what ghosts she carried with her. The age gap between us wasn't just a number, it was a chasm filled with expectations, judgments, and unspoken rules. She was older, more experienced, shaped by a lifetime of choices I was only just beginning to understand. And maybe that was the risk, stepping into a story that wasn't supposed to have me in it. "I didn't mean to stay so long," she said, voice uneven, like the words were unfamiliar strangers. It's just, sometimes, the past doesn't know when to let go. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. There were things I wanted to say, truths I wanted to lay bare, but they got tangled somewhere between my heart and my lips. Instead, I let the silence do the work, a pause heavy enough to hold the unsaid. Her eyes flicked away, and I caught the briefest shadow of something raw, regret, maybe, or longing. It wasn't just me she was afraid of. It was the memories that clung to her, the ones that whispered about mistakes and love lost in the cracks of time. I shifted on the sofa, clearing my throat. Sometimes, I think about the things I've missed. Like life's been moving, and I'm just watching from the sidelines. She looked up then, her gaze steady, and for a moment, I saw past the poised exterior, a woman who had been hurt, who had waited and wondered if she'd ever be seen again. Watching from the sidelines, that's a lonely place, she said quietly. I laughed, a little bitter, a little hopeful. Yeah. And sometimes you get used to it so much that you forget how to jump back in. Her smile was small but genuine. Maybe that's why it's risky, because jumping back in means risking the fall. There was a softness in her voice that made the space between us shrink, but also made everything feel so fragile. I wanted to reach out, to steady her somehow, but I hesitated. The last thing either of us needed was to rush. She stood and moved to the window, the streetlights casting a pale glow on her profile. I followed, grabbing a napkin from the table, wiping a speck of dust from the glass. A silly gesture, but she caught it and smiled, an acknowledgement of the little things that stitched us together. Then, almost by accident, her hand brushed mine as she turned. The touch was light, a whisper of contact, but it lingered a second too long. My heart caught in my chest, and I bit my lip to keep from speaking. You're different from what I expected, she said, voice soft, as if testing the air between us. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that I wasn't brave or steady, but instead I said, maybe we're both surprised. Her eyes searched mine, holding a question that didn't have words yet. The night felt thick with everything left unsaid, promises, fears, hopes all tangled in a fragile thread. And as she lingered there, on the edge of something we weren't ready to name, I realized that sometimes the biggest risk isn't falling. It's standing still, caught between what was and what might be. She made tea like it was something sacred, slow, careful, each movement deliberate. I sat at the counter, watching the way her fingers wrapped around the mug, the way the steam curled up past her face and softened her features. It should have felt ordinary. It didn't. Her back was to me when she asked, "Do you ever think about stopping time?" I didn't answer right away. The question felt too big for the moment, or maybe too honest. She turned slightly, her eyes catching mine over her shoulder. "Like just freezing a moment before it turns into something else," she added. "Before it gets complicated." I gave a crooked smile. "Sounds like something someone says when they already know it's too late." She laughed, but it wasn't light. More like a breath being held too long finally slipping out. She handed me the mug, her fingers brushing mine again, and this time neither of us pulled away quickly enough. The silence that followed wasn't comfortable. It wasn't awkward either. It was heavy. Dense with everything we weren't saying. "I should go," she said softly. But she didn't move. She stood right there, close enough that I could see the fine lines near her mouth, the ones that only showed when she was tired or trying too hard not to feel. "You keep saying that," I murmured. Her eyes met mine, a flicker of conflict behind them, like her heart and mind were out of sync. "I mean it this time." "Okay." But still, she stayed. The heat between us was no longer something quiet. It was humming now, restless and near the surface. I could see it in the way she shifted her weight, the way her hand gripped the counter edge just a little too tight. "I had a life before this," she said, almost to herself. "A husband. A house. Friends who asked less questions. You still have that life," I replied, though I didn't believe it fully. She turned to face me completely, arms crossed like a shield. "No. I have pieces of it. I have phone calls I don't return, dinners I don't look forward to, and someone waiting at home who stopped seeing me a long time ago. The confession hung in the air, raw and exposed. I took a slow sip of the tea just to keep from saying what I was thinking. I wanted to tell her she deserved more, to be seen, to be wanted, but that would have made this real. And maybe we weren't ready for that. A faint buzz broke the moment. Her phone on the table lit up. A name flashed across the screen. She didn't reach for it. We both looked, then looked away. Her hand was near mine again. Not touching. Just close. I couldn't help it, my pinky moved, grazing hers. She flinched, just barely, but didn't pull away. I should go, she whispered again. I nodded. She stayed. And even as I stared at the untouched tea in my hands, pretending nothing had changed, I could feel it, every cell in my body pulled toward her. I knew I shouldn't be feeling this, but I was. The room felt warmer than it should have. Or maybe it was just me, pacing the same patch of hardwood like movement could outrun feeling. She stood near the bookshelf now, fingers trailing across the spines of novels she'd probably read before I was born. Her lips were parted, like she wanted to say something but didn't trust the words. I could feel it, the tension curling between us, coiling tighter with every second of silence. And then I heard myself say it, not planned, not smooth, just a raw scrape of a truth I hadn't meant to let out. I think about you. More than I should. Her fingers stilled on a book cover. She didn't turn around right away. I felt the shift in the air, heavy, sharp. When she finally turned, her face was unreadable. But her eyes, they were a storm. You don't know what you're saying, she said, too calm. I do. I shot back, louder than I meant to. Don't pretend like this is nothing. You feel it too. She blinked. Once. Twice. Then looked down, hands suddenly fidgeting with the bracelet on her wrist. You're young, she said quietly. This is just a phase for you. A moment you'll look back on and be glad didn't happen. That's not fair, I said, stepping toward her. Don't make this about my age just because you're scared. Her head snapped up at that. I am scared, she admitted. You think I don't wake up every day wondering how I let it get this far? Her voice cracked then. And that broke something in me. She went on, her words quick now, like she couldn't stop. You're kind and open and you see me, and it's terrifying. Because it's been years since anyone looked at me like that without seeing what's missing. I moved closer, heart pounding. And how long are you going to punish yourself for being wanted? Her lips trembled, but she didn't look away. The distance between us was a breath now. One shaky inhale and we'd be touching. One blink and I'd close the space. You don't know what you're doing, she whispered. I know I'd regret walking away more than I'd ever regret this. And then it happened. Not a kiss, not quite, but my hand brushed her cheek, barely there, like asking permission without speaking. She leaned into it, just enough to make my heart stop. Her breath caught. I felt her hand come up to mine, hold it, press into it. Then a phone rang in the kitchen. Neither of us moved. We stayed frozen, skin on skin, hearts thudding. The phone kept ringing. She didn't answer. I can't do this, she said, but her voice had no conviction. And I, barely breathing, said, Then tell me to go. Her eyes searched mine, wild and wet and undone. Silence. Then, almost broken, she whispered, Don't go. Her fingers still rested on mine. Neither of us had moved since the moment cracked open, too afraid that if we did, it would shatter entirely. The phone had stopped ringing. The silence that followed wasn't peaceful. It pressed against my ribs like weight I couldn't lift. She was the one who moved first. Just a shift, barely a step back, like the air between us had become too thick to breathe. Her hand slipped away from mine. Not yanked, not sudden. Just gone. Her eyes dropped. I shouldn't have said that. I blinked. But you did. She nodded once, like she was agreeing with something she wished she could undo. Then she reached for her phone, tapped the screen. Her lips pressed into a thin, trembling line. Was that him? I asked, even though I didn't want to know. Her silence was louder than any answer. I took a small step back, not because I wanted to, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands, my heart, any of it. I thought you said you were done with I am, she said, cutting me off. But her voice was tired. It's been over for a long time. Just not on paper. I stared at her. You should have told me. She looked at me then, eyes glassy. I didn't want you to see me that way. What way? She hesitated. As someone who's stuck. Weak. Still tangled up in something she should have walked away from years ago. I shook my head, swallowing the ache rising in my throat. You think I wouldn't understand what it means to be stuck? She didn't answer. She didn't have to. Her silence told me she didn't believe I'd stay once I saw the whole truth. That's what she was always doing, pulling away before anyone else could. I walked to the window, needing to look at anything that wasn't her face. I'm leaving, you know, I said quietly. I didn't mean for it to come out then. It had been sitting on my tongue for weeks, waiting for the right time. But of course, there never was one. Her breath hitched. When? End of the month. I got offered a residency. Chicago. The words sat between us like something sharp. She didn't speak. Just crossed her arms, holding herself like something fragile. I wasn't planning on telling you like this, I added. But I thought. I don't know. Maybe we had time. She turned to me slowly. So that's it? I don't know, I said honestly. I don't want it to be. Her eyes searched mine, but not like before. This time, they were guarded. She'd pulled the walls back up and locked them from the inside. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. Neither do I. She stepped toward the doorway, hand brushing the frame again like it could anchor her. The same way she had the first time. I'm not ready, she said. I know. She lingered there. I didn't move. And for a long, aching moment, it felt like goodbye, but neither of us said it. The night was colder than the ones before. The window fogged faintly from the warmth inside, but the space between us had cooled. She sat on the arm of the couch, not relaxed, perched, like she might bolt at any second. Her arms were crossed. Her eyes distant. I stood across from her, still wearing my coat. I hadn't taken it off when I walked in, and now it felt symbolic, like I didn't know if I was staying. She broke the silence first. Why did you come back? I looked at her. Really looked. Because I couldn't leave it like that, I said. And because I haven't been able to stop thinking about you. Her lips parted slightly, but no words came. I continued, voice low. I want you. I do. But I don't know how this can work, and that scares the hell out of me. She closed her eyes, then opened them slowly. Do you think I don't want you to? I don't know what to think. You never let me. She flinched a little at that, like it landed deeper than I intended. But I wasn't sorry. We were past the point of polite restraint. She stood, walked slowly past me toward the table, picking up a book just to hold it. You're young. You still believe you can want something and have it just because the feeling is strong enough. I'm not a kid, I said, firmer now. Don't reduce this to my age when you know it's more than that. She turned sharply. Then what do you want from me? I stared at her, every part of me aching. I want your truth, I said. Not the version you rehearse for everyone else. The real one. The scared one. The one who kissed me and told me not to go. Her eyes filled, but she blinked it away. The truth is, I stopped letting myself want anything a long time ago. It's safer that way. But you do want something, I whispered. She nodded. You. The word hung between us, delicate and devastating. But I also want to not lose myself again, she said, her voice barely above a breath. I've spent years trying to remember who I am when no one's needing me or loving me or breaking me. And you shake that foundation. I stepped closer, slow. I don't want to take anything from you. You already have, she said, finally looking at me fully. You took the silence I'd learned to live with. You took the numbness. And now I feel everything, all the time. I didn't reach for her. I wanted to. But I let the moment breathe. I'm leaving, I said. But not tonight. She stared at me, eyes rimmed with something unspoken. I don't need an answer, I said softly. I just need to know the door won't close behind me. She nodded once. And then she stepped aside, quietly, gently, and left the door open. The rain had started again, soft and steady, tracing the windows like a rhythm neither of us wanted to interrupt. We sat at the table in silence, not the uncomfortable kind that used to wedge itself between us, but something easier now. Like the stillness after a storm. Her fingers were curled around her mug, steam rising and disappearing into the morning light. Mine rested close to hers, not touching, but near enough that it didn't matter. We'd stopped needing to prove anything with words. I almost didn't call you last night, she said finally. I glanced at her, brow raised. She smiled faintly, eyes on her coffee. I thought maybe it was better if we just let it go. Let the goodbye stay clean. I let that sit for a moment, then said quietly, clean doesn't mean honest. Her eyes met mine, and this time, she didn't look away. I was terrified, she admitted. Of the age difference. Of what people would say. Of losing the version of myself I'd built to survive. I nodded. And I was terrified of being a phase to you. Of you waking up one day and realizing I was just a spark you didn't really need. She reached for my hand, slowly, like she still wasn't sure if it was allowed. I met her halfway. Our fingers laced together like we'd done it 1,000 times already. I've lost things before, she said. But this time, I didn't want to lose myself in you. You don't have to choose, I said. Not with me. There was a quiet in her that used to be armor. Now, it just felt like breath. I stood and moved to the window. She joined me a beat later, her shoulder brushing mine. Outside, the world looked soft and wet and new, like something had been rinsed clean. Chicago still happening? She asked. I nodded. In a week. A pause. Then, her voice small but certain. I could visit. See what the silence feels like there. I smiled. It's a quieter kind of city. You might like it. She leaned her head lightly against my shoulder. I'm not running anymore. Me neither. We stood there a while, not needing to speak. The world outside moved on, cars passed, the rain slowed, but in that kitchen, time held still just long enough for us to feel like we'd finally arrived. Not in a perfect ending, but in a true one.